This is Michael Kennedy. I'm the Customer Success Manager for the state of Texas. And Joy just reminded me to start the recording. So thank you, Joy, for your partnership. And then thank you for reminding me to start the recording. So we're going to be covering some usage and the number of people here in Texas which are using Teams and some new features. Then we're going to really delve into productivity and how do we analyze productivity in Teams. And we've been having a pretty lively discussion about some of the new capabilities. And so I just really want to say welcome to the team. I've been using this slide for a few months now, and it really illustrates well just that there are so many of us now that are using Teams, and the number of people that are using Teams worldwide has increased by the millions especially since COVID-19. And for the state of Texas, Microsoft just finished our fiscal year, and Texas, finished as the top state and local government strategic account in Teams adoption. So I want to say congratulations to all of you, and thank you for using Teams. It is the product that I care the most about and the one that I work the most with. Back in May, we had, I'll go back in December, we had 7,000 users. By May, we had 32,000. In June, we had 49,000, and we finished, I checked just today, and we are now up to 53,848 active users of Teams. And active users does not mean that they turned it on once and then just turned it off and minimized it, but that means that they're actively using it. And so, again, want to say thank you to everybody who is using Teams and continuing to use Teams. And I want to welcome the Comptroller Public Accounts. They turned on Teams in a huge way about a week and a half ago. And so they are part of this number now. And so they are the newest agency who has really broadly rolled out Teams. So welcome. I think there's 4 people that registered from the Comptroller. So welcome to all of you.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that, Michael.
Yeah,
we're very excited.
Absolutely.
It works freaking amazing. We love it. And we thank you guys for your help, and this forum's been very useful for us as well.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. Who was that speaking? I couldn't see.
Oh, yeah, Vince Sellers.
Thank you, Vince. Oh, excellent. Yeah, thanks, Vince, so much. And Max, you're requesting control. Are you really requesting control?
No, but once you push it, I don't know how to undo it. So I apologize. I just clicked the wrong part of my screen.
No problem, Max. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. So I declined. So some of the features updates. One of the things that had been a challenge with Teams is the limitation of 250 people simultaneously in a meeting. Joy remembers well, as do I. We were doing a training on live events, and we were using Teams to do that, and we blasted right past that 250-person cap. And so we had about 30 people that were not able to get into the meeting. So Microsoft has now increased that capacity to 300 people to be in a Teams meeting simultaneously. And we are working toward increasing that further. And so one of the things you'll see in some of the announcements that we're making is really increasing that to a much larger level. I will warn that there is a possibility that might be a different license type, like a little add-on or something, to be able to have these massive meetings using Teams. We will still have live events. And so, but to have this interactive where people can come off mute, which I love, we now have the ability to have 300 people in a simultaneous meeting. We also have the live captions feature, which I hope most of you are using at this point, although I try to speak clearly. I actually wear hearing aids, and so when I'm watching TV or when I'm in meetings, I often turn on the captioning just as it helps me to make sure and not miss what people are saying. And the translation accuracy is really quite good. And so I'm glad for that feature to be now rolling out more broadly and now to have it inside of GCC. So another thing that has been added is a new capability that is built into Office 365 called Shifts. And Shifts is really designed around what can be referred to as frontline worker or first line worker or just your scheduled workers. And so this is a capability, and it is part of Teams, but it has a different interface. And so it can be enabled inside of your tenant, and it allows you to create, update, and manage schedules for your team. So this can be something that is really straightforward, such as maybe you have a call center and you want to schedule people to work different shifts in the call center. It has the ability to have a published calendar for people to sign up for time slots or to be assigned time slots by their manager. It also has the ability, if the manager allows that, to be able to trade shifts. And so if someone wants to trade a different day off or take on a shift, or someone wants to offer up a shift, that is possible. And so very feature rich. It does also integrate into backend systems like Kronos. And so if you're using Kronos, there are capabilities to integrate those too. And so really powerful. And one usage of shifts that is something that's really cool, as we at some point, hopefully in the future, start to go back to the buildings where we work, we're seeing that some agencies are looking at using shifts to schedule, okay, if we're only going to have 25% of our workers in the building at a time, then you can actually schedule when you're going to be going to the building. And so I think that's a really creative use of shifts that could be something that we're, and someone has, there we go. So I muted. So these others are features that have come out over the last two Texas Teams community meetings. We had the raise your hand feature, which we talked about, the custom backgrounds, which we were showing. We went from 2x2 video, which means 4 videos on a screen at a time, to 3x3 video. And then we added private channels inside of Teams and one-day retention, and then the ability to have third-party applications added in. So applications such as Adobe Sign, Kronos, like I mentioned earlier, ServiceNow, Workday, Salesforce. There's all kinds of third-party applications that can be added into Teams. And so it's just a tab inside of Teams that makes it so that you can really have an integrated experience, so you can stay right inside of the user interface of Teams, but still get to your other applications. There are some nice features that have been added, but one of the things that I want to do is share with you guys an announcement about what is coming in Teams Futures. Now, the vast majority of these capabilities are going to be coming in August to the commercial cloud. I was also very excited in a call today with Teams Engineering to find out that we are really working very hard to decrease the amount of time from when a feature rolls out in the commercial cloud to when it's available in the GCC. And so the commitment that we are working toward is 30 days. And the reason behind the delay at all is that the GCC has these certifications, again, like CJIS, Criminal Justice Information System, IRS 1075. There are some other certifications that are software has to go through in order to be released in the GCC. So that's the primary reason for the delay. But that time has shrunk significantly. Just even a year ago, it was more like 6 months or even a year for a feature to be behind what rolled out for commercial. So as we look at these features, again, these will be probably coming in the early to mid to late fall timeframe for the vast majority of us. So I'm going to play this video. This is on YouTube, and this was announced yesterday. So very excited about these new capabilities. And then we're going to dig into it a little bit in more detail.
There's no audio, Michael.
No, there's not. Let me pause that real quick then, because you're really missing out on some very happy jazzy music if there's no audio. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, start sharing again, and I'll make sure and share my system audio. Thanks, Sandra. Okay, I think it's going to play from the beginning. So, can you hear it now?
Yep.
Yes. All right, that's like a stretch break, that music. So some really, really cool features that you saw there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to my browser and just talk a little bit about a few of those. The first is something that I did not think that we were going to see inside of Teams, which is this large gallery view. And so I'm going to include the link to each of these pages in the slides that we'll send out afterward. And so you can come and read these fully and watch the more in-depth videos about these features. But this large gallery view is bringing in a lot more participants. This is a 7x7 grid, so you have 49 people on the screen simultaneously. I'm a believer that that's a lot of people to have on a screen. And so I questioned having that many people on the screen at one time, but then we created that other view that is putting it more into an auditorium style seating. And we'll go into that in just a second. One of the things that has been a capability in another platform, Zoom, is these virtual breakout rooms. And so we are going to be having breakout rooms that give you the ability to have, let's say you're doing a training or a conference and you have a main room and then you have these different breakout rooms, then that's going to be a capability that is built into Teams natively. There is a workaround to do that and to set up multiple meetings at the same time. It's a little bit harder, just takes a little bit more planning to do, but that is something that will be native into the platform. And then something that some of you may have already seen is this multi-window for meetings and calling. And so right now, when I'm using Teams, once I start a meeting, I still have my Teams window open, and then I have the meeting window as well. And you can even break out chat into a separate window. One of the advantages of Teams is staying in context, but there are times when it's really nice to have a meeting here and then to be able to flip over and have a chat with somebody that is separate from that. So I think this is going to increase the usability, although it will increase our multitasking a little bit. So that's a bit challenging. We talked about the 300 participants. There is ability to launch meetings right inside of a channel, which is going to get a little bit easier. Some of these other capabilities around, this is around telephony features. These are not features that are available in the state of Texas. There's a law that prevents us from selling our telephony capabilities in Texas. And so, but there's a new Microsoft Teams from Bose and some additional capabilities here. These are just, let's see, these are the features of that device. And then there is if you haven't seen a Surface Hub, we had one at our first meeting, and if we can ever get together again, then we'll probably bring a Surface Hub. That's a stand-up device, and so gives a really nice conference room meeting capability. And then we're also, if you did not have an Office 365 license and you were using the free version of Teams, then we're adding the calendaring capability. And then there's several other things. I'm going to move on here just so I can show you just a couple of other things that are on this same slide. So this is that view, which is the conferencing. I'm sorry, the together mode view. And so it's going to have this like everybody sitting in seats in an auditorium, and so it literally takes your kind of your avatar and sort of makes you look a little bit more three-dimensional just using your regular camera, and then puts you into the audience like this. And we think it's going to be an easier way to view people, and it feels a little bit more friendly than just a little box with your whole video in it. And so that's using some of those AI, artificial intelligence capabilities to figure out who you are versus your background. This article just goes into more of these advanced capabilities and features. This thing around dynamic view, so that you can switch between different views based on what content you're sharing. I think it's going to be really popular. We saw the video filtering. So this is very similar to the blur my background or custom backgrounds, but is going to have some more effects for lighting. And then we looked at some of the capabilities like the live reactions, which is the ability during a meeting to, instead of just liking something, you can actually just show your favoritism toward that meeting as it's going on, which I think is, again, just going to be something that is helping it to be a little bit more interactive and a little bit better experience for our users. And then the last thing that I wanted to share, and that's part of the PowerPoint, is this article on the future of work, the good, the challenging, and the unknown. And there's a lot of research that is in this article about work trends and some kind of surprising things about the fatigue of being in meeting after meeting where the video is on. It's just a bit challenging and tends to be more stressful for individuals. as well as some surprising research on the challenge it's going to be to go back to the workplace, not just the challenge of being concerned about the virus, but actual challenges of interacting with humans again versus just being in meetings. So some interesting things that are coming up from a research standpoint as we hopefully head back to work at some point in the not too distant future. I always like to highlight some of the training that's available. There's a link right here to the Microsoft Teams interactive demo. So for those of you who are new users to Teams, this is a great interactive demo that shows off the capabilities of Teams. Also, in the lower left-hand corner of Teams, there's a link for help, and then you can go to training, and it has really nice articles and videos of how to do different tasks inside of Teams. There is a website that your admins can download, and it runs inside of your own SharePoint environment. And this is called the Learning Pathways site. And right here under this Microsoft 365 training is a whole lot of videos and training, and what training is available can be controlled so that you can make sure and highlight the kind of training that you're looking for your end users. So if you're an administrator, this is a great, it's freely available, and Microsoft creates all the content. There's a link right here of how to download that and put it into your environment. Sandra, who has come off mute a couple of times and helped me, she's always a great help to me during these meetings. She is part of our Microsoft Store Customer Success Training Program, the CST. Many of our agencies have taken advantage of this training, and I've gotten very, very positive feedback on the quality of the training and the flexibility of the team and the work that they're able to do. And so if your agency is interested in training, there is an email address right here, mrs0011smb@microsoft.com. And if you send an email to this email address, then you can request training. And this is Teams training, that's 100 and 200 level. They have training on Power BI, on Power Apps. Sandra, what am I missing? I know you guys have a lot more training.
SharePoint, Excel. We've been doing quite a few Teams trainings, 100, 200 level. What else? Forms. We also do Sway. I mean, the sky's the limit. So if we don't have content, we'll figure something out, but definitely reach out to us.
Great. Yeah. And again, I've gotten very, very positive feedback from everybody that's attended that training. So, and that is included with your relationship with Microsoft. There is no charge for that.
Yeah, somebody just asked precisely about pricing, completely free to you all. So the sooner you reach out to us, the better. We are booking all the way through until September right now. So reach out to us for sure.
Yeah. Can I just jump in really quickly and say, my name is Billy Stevenson. I work at UT Southwestern, and we are working with Microsoft on customer success training, and it has been absolutely transformational and revolutionary to our institution. We've done some internal training that I've hosted, and it was great getting us started, but just the professionality and the context that Microsoft brings when they're doing training coming on campus, it is very much it's a feeling of an event that you kind of get, even though we're working remotely. It's really excited. People are excited, and we have hundreds of people showing up on their Teams live events, hundreds of questions, consummate professionals, absolute experts, superbly engaging. So if there's any kind of way that I can encourage you to bring them on campus, let me tell you, it will absolutely elevate your business results. It's amazing. I mean, I think we have them for 2 months. I can't say enough. I cannot say enough.
Well, thank you, Billy. That is completely awesome. I love it, and I love your enthusiasm. And that is, it may not be quite as eloquently stated as you said, but that is the same feedback I've gotten from everybody that's used it. So as Sandra said, they are booking out. So please just send a request, and we'll get you scheduled for that. There is a lot of training that's available, that is through the product, that's available online, that's through the training dashboard here. But the customer success training really is customized to your environment, and they are really wonderful training professionals. And the stores have ramped up significantly the number of training professionals that they have available due to all of the at home and the virtual training that's now available through the program. There's a book called Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams. Is a manager's guide. So I wanted to plug that. It's someone, I think they actually used to work at Microsoft. I don't get paid anything if you buy it, but you can purchase it on Amazon or any of your other booksellers. I use Amazon a lot, so I just put a little link to the book right there. but I've heard it's quite good. I have a copy. It's on a stack of books that I intend to read. So without further ado, I want to hand this over to Tim Cohn. Tim and I have known each other for years. Some of you know I actually used to work at Catapult, so I had the pleasure of working with Tim for 6 years. He has about 25 plus years working in state and local government on very large programs, and is now the National Practice Director of Productivity at Catapult Systems, which is an Austin-based Microsoft partner, one of our highest level partners. And in addition to all of that, Tim has a master's degree in econometrics. So that means he really loves the data. And so Tim is going to share with us some of the productivity analysis capabilities and how to measure productivity in Office 365. And with that, let me stop sharing and hand the screen over to Tim.
Hey, Michael, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, and welcome everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Yeah, I do like the numbers. And so, but, econometrics is economics. It's statistics about what people are doing and why they're doing it, right? So what I really enjoy when we talk about looking at the numbers, especially around teams, is why are we looking at them? Like, what do we want to get out of them? So as Michael said, Michael, you hear me okay? Just double checking.
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you, Tim.
Perfect. I do work with Catapult Systems, and some of you know us and some of you may not, but we are headquartered in Austin. We do a lot of work with the DIR, with Joy and everybody over there. So we try to be super good partners with them. We always promise to deliver. We try and be easy to work with, and we bring the whole team. So that's what we promise everybody we work with. And we've been a Microsoft partner for a long time, about over 20 years now. So we have a lot of MVPs and folks that work with the development team. So thanks for giving me time today. So as we talk through teams, there's a lot of great features and a lot of new stuff that's coming out all the time. And actually the current situation we're in has only accelerated that. And kudos to Microsoft, but sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? So I do like to get back to that why question all the time. Why would we measure teams adoption? What are we thinking of when we do that? And then we can get into some how do we measure, what kind of tools we can use to do that. And some of you may know these tools already, and some of you, this may be the first thing that you've seen. But then also, how do we improve what we're doing all the time? So when we talk about measuring adoption in teams or even in Office 365 in general, there's some measures, and one of those measures we have is user dispersion, they call it, which is the number of users that are dispersed outside of a single workplace. Some companies or organizations are highly dispersed normally. I work with large energy companies down in Houston that are all over the globe. Or you might have an organization like Department of Family and Protective Services that has 5,000 remote workers out there across the state of Texas. So dispersion comes in many different formats, but what we've seen recently is a massive increase in employee dispersion across the board. So you can see there was early in COVID here, we saw the massive spike, and that spike has kind of leveled off to some extent with about, on average, 65% of an organization's workers working remotely. In some cases, it's even higher. So massive increase in the amount of the spread of employees. And it's not the office, right? We need new measurement tools. When you can talk to people and see people in the office, a lot of times you know what they're doing, you know what's going on. It's relatively easy to, in many ways, measure what they're doing. We need some different tools to do that now that everybody's working remotely. Remote work for many folks is a new skill. I love going to the office. Haven't been able to do that for a while, but I also have worked out of my car and out of cardboard boxes and other things for many, many years. So for me, not such a big shift, but for a lot of people, it is a new way of working. So we have to identify teams or people that are having issues with adoption and change. So there's a lot of new capabilities coming out. that allow us to improve all the time. And we have to make sure that your organization, especially if you're a team's admin or a manager, that you're getting the most value from the investment that you've made in Microsoft, and that you don't have folks that are missing out on the features and the benefits that are being offered. So just to establish some vocabulary, we're looking at qualitative and quantitative measurements. So qualitative are things that we perceive as quality, and that we can't really put a number on, like a morale in some cases, right? How people feel about using Teams, or how people feel about the work that they're doing. Quantitative measurements are things, and we'll look at some examples of each of these, that we can actually put numbers on. How many users are using Teams? How many chats? How many conversations are going on? And quantitative, both of those measurements have their place in understanding productivity in Office 365. So the metrics that you use are very important. You have to evaluate where you are, right, before you get started. Understand what your baseline and benchmark measurements are. Identify those key performance indicators that can improve, right, based on your desired outcomes. Employee satisfaction, times to process orders, or times to answer questions for constituents. And for qualitative results, right, how do we identify the success stories? Find examples using our business champion. This group right here is a group of Teams champions, and I think we heard a great qualitative recommendation for Microsoft training just a minute ago. That probably pinned a badge of quality on that training group even better than some measurements would. But at the same time, it'd be great to look and see how that training has impacted maybe the way that teachers collaborate, or that the admissions office can more quickly process requests or applications or different things like that. And so it's good to look at both of those qualitative and quantitative measurements. So the key thing in here is using both of those, the stories plus the data, can tell you whether you're being successful with your Teams rollout or not. So when we build out that measurement framework, it's great to identify a baseline, right, for each scenario. Understand why you're measuring, include technologies that are part of that scenario. So what are the benefits? Are we more agile? Are we meeting program goals? Is our quality of service going up? Do we have a user satisfaction measure or some kind of productivity measure that we want to measure in our scenario? And then what's driving that? Is it email? Is it collab on SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive? Is there real-time communications in Skype or Teams, of course? And then is there something in enterprise social that's helping us drive our capabilities, right? And then with our measurement maturity, we're looking for ways to define whether things are good, whether things can be better, or whether we're doing the best job we possibly can. And so we build that measurement framework to look at our goals, the capabilities that we're doing, and then the maturity of the measurement that's going on. So I don't want to drain this slide so we can actually get through some of these examples. Those of you who have done any systems development, you'll understand, or even any self-help stuff, you'll see SMART goals, right? When we define success in a measurement framework, the way we define that is through these SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. When we talk to customers about defining success criteria for business scenarios associated to Teams or other uses of Office 365, we also talk about the criticality to create this formal set of success criteria so that you know if you've won, right? If you've gotten better. And so we also recommend that you choose criteria to help you determine where you have problems. So knowing where you have problems is just as important as knowing where you've been successful. So you can't shy away from either success criteria or scenarios around success criteria that identify a sore spot or a problem area. Those are the best places to start to mine improvements. A great example of quantitative measurements, this came from a Microsoft report, actually. When we have to define a productivity measure or a scenario, a good example of this is one-on-one reports. So a Microsoft study that they recently did showed that that consistent one-on-one time between managers and employees leads to a decrease in the increase of work hours. And what they've seen is that as employees have moved out of the office, right, due to COVID, their work hours have increased. And I'm sure some of you have seen this. That increase in work hours is lower for employees that have high manager one-on-one time. So where their objectives, the things they need to do, their prioritization is clarified with consistent one-on-ones. And so having those one-on-ones reduced, having good one-on-ones, good habits before COVID and after COVID can reduce the additional time that people have put in by more than 65%. That's pretty dramatic, right, to the work-life balance of your employees. And so how do you know if your organization is having good manager one-on-ones outside of folks being in the office? Well, that's something that Microsoft Office 365 can help you determine, right? And I'll show you in a little bit. This box on the left here is from my analytics report, and it tells me who I'm collaborating with. So who I spent the most time, next tier and next tier, right? And, Jeff and Andrew in my organization are my two main direct reports. They're my practice managers. Natalie is the head of our project management office, and Jim is my boss, and Eric is one of our strategists who I work with a lot for the practice. And so by looking at my top collaborators, I know that I'm actually spending significant time every week with people who are important to my mission. Down here are some sales folks and some of my practice technical leads, right? And then down here is marketing and other practice directors and other directors and VPs that I work with and other project managers. And so by looking at my collaborators, I can see the kind of time that I'm spending with people in my organization. And so now these exact statistics are coming out in a new Microsoft Modern Workplace Analytics offering that's going to be coming out this summer. I don't have the time frame for inclusion in the GCC, but as Michael said, Microsoft is working very hard to reduce the amount of time that it takes for improvements to come from the enterprise cloud to the government cloud. But this new workplace analytics offering that's coming through Microsoft is going to be really, really neat, and we'll be able to provide some of these statistics. And they'll be able to, and I'll talk a little bit about privacy and some of the other concerns that we've seen around this. But for qualitative successes, for those of you who use Teams now, the conversations are fantastic, right? And so I just put an example of a conversation. In this case, I did some work with the folks at WIC and nutrition education and that type of stuff. In this case, someone out in the field is putting into a channel, and maybe you have a channel for this program, and the channel saying, "Hey, we're having an issue out here," and some other folks are saying, "Yeah, I see that. We have nutrition training for Spanish-speaking expectant moms, right? And we have questions on what's going on with that." And then, I started seeing this as well, right? And maybe Yakuko Souza, right, she's in the call center and she's saying, "I'm getting a lot of calls into the office about what's going on there." And then someone from the nutrition program is on that conversation, right, in that channel, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, we didn't, this is something we didn't see when we did testing. We deployed some changes and corrections based on COVID-19 and new information about nutrition." right? And then a supervisor gets on or a program manager gets on and they say, oh yeah, we put out some new information here. I put a link to that information here. Let's take a look at it. And then they resolve it, right? Oh, we had some problems with the translation. It made the questions unintelligible, right? And so that impacted some of our users. So this is not a real scenario, but it's a scenario that you could see happening within a conversation, and capturing the success story around solving that problem through the ability for a lot of people to get on a conversation in teams very quickly is something that allows you to define those qualitative successes. I've got some examples in here. I don't want to drain the slide going through there, but you can build out the key here is having the success criteria, having a method to define it, and having an example for it. And when we go through with organizations and set up success criterias and scenarios and success criterias, it is really helpful to define all of these features for them as you go through that exercise, so that you can properly identify or fully identify the wins. And I see these scenarios that you build and the success criteria around them as the creation of a deck for your agency's top leaders, and say, look, here's organizational problems that we found. Here's how we determined to solve them, and here's what happened, right? And so when you get into what's the business value for your scenario, what's the type of value, who are the business owners, what are the KPI measures, what are the data sources that we're going to use to measure those KPIs, how do we get our formulas, what's our baseline, what's our target? This basically builds that slide to a director or a agency manager that says, this is how we succeeded. This is our highlights for maybe this quarter's team's adoption activities, right? And so you can if you build out this type of grid for the business scenarios and the business values that you set, your goals and how you measure them, it builds that presentation itself, so that you can go in and say, wow, we are really getting a lot of value out of deploying Microsoft Office or Office 365 and Teams specifically.
And everybody, what we'll do is, Tim, if you'll send me your slides afterward, then I'll incorporate those into the main deck, and then I'll put those into a PDF and then send them right over to Joy. And again, if you'll please make sure and do the sign in, then we will send you the slides, and we'll send you just a link to the recording as well. And you're feel free to share the slides that get sent out and the link to the recording to anyone in your agency or other agencies. This isn't exclusive to those who attended.
Exactly. Thanks, Mike. And Microsoft does have a productivity score that you can get through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. They're revamping that, and I think you'll see some new stuff come out. It's interesting. We haven't figured out how to derive a ton of value out of it, but it does have some interesting things about third-party agents and legacy technology and how folks are using technology within your organization. Some IT departments like it because it does talk about other systems that are being used in your environment. So I'm going to go through just a couple of examples. Let me minimize this. No. So I'm going to go through some examples of measurement of productivity within Office 365. So I don't know how many of you have My Analytics turned on. It is available in the G3 and G5 subscription and can be turned on. We've turned it on a long time ago, and I actually use it all the time. And it has some great features in it. So if you look here, it gives you a dashboard. This is my own, so I will expose all my bad habits to you all. It has 4 main areas: focus, well-being, network, and collab. Now, this data is only visible to the user. This data is not visible to your manager. It's not visible to IT. It's anonymized. It's stuck behind a GUID somewhere, which is a unique ID that's 20 characters long, and it's anonymized. But it is really helpful. So when you get into the focus, it tells you how much time you've spent actually focused and what working, like working time, and it can help you book focus time on your calendar. Really neat. You can see my available to focus time has not been good, but I try and increase that because I do spend a lot of times in meetings, and sometimes it's nice to have time just to sit down, think, and actually get stuff done. Well-being goes into how long, how much time you spend outside of working hours. So do I have quiet days or days when I don't do things within Office 365? I've got a few of those. So I kept my quiet hours on 12 days and out of the month, and I lost my quiet hours on 16 of them. My longest streak is 4 days. I think that was over the 4th of July weekend. And I have compromised my nightly recharge a couple days last week by working past midnight. So as you all can see, I'm somewhat of a workaholic. And so this just confirms that.
We still love you, Tim.
Thanks. The other thing I showed you earlier was my collaborators. So I have 96 active collaborators and 332 people that I've emailed, chatted, or met with in the past 12 months. And I do most of my collaborating internally. This is kind of nice for people that need to know who they're working with and where they're working. I showed you this grid before, this map view. It is really, really helpful to see where you're spending your time. And then the last one is the collaboration time. Talks about your meeting habits, high attendance. I have a terrible problem with overlap of other meetings, invitations sent with it. I only have 67% of my invitations are sent with at least a day's notice. Very bad habit. Emails and chats during meetings, online meetings joined on time, working hours, those kind of things. So these individual productivity statistics are the things that the Microsoft Workplace Analytics package is looking to roll, or the Modern Workplace Analytics to roll up into an anonymized organizational view. So you can see, and this would be where they would find things like how many one-on-one meetings managers have had with employees, or which departments are working too many hours, right? Or hours outside of their normal workday, that type of stuff. Really neat capabilities there.
Yeah,
I'll cover a couple.
Workplace analytics. Yeah, I just a little bit more detail on that is again, as Tim mentioned, it is completely anonymized, and so it is not something that comes with your Office 365. For larger organizations, larger than 500 users, then it really can help guide the departmental and divisional and top leaders in an organization as to some of the workplace habits, and are people working too many hours on the weekends and at nights, and how can we provide coaching on work-life balance, and then also really looking at things like isolation. So is this group really working in a bubble and not working and collaborating with the other members of their organization, or how efficiently are different members of different departments working cross-departmentally? And so it's a lot of valuable insight. And again, that would just be for the larger organizations.
Yeah, so everybody individually can look at your analytics, but yeah, for those larger organizations, and I do believe you have to have more than 500 users in your org to look at to be able to properly anonymize the results from the larger workplace analytics. I'll show you one thing that can come along with that is a daily briefing email. Cortana will send you an email. Today, she sent me an email with a couple of tasks that I may have missed. 7 days ago, Michael Kennedy asked me to block my calendar from 2:40 to 4:45. And this is not a setup. This came into my mailbox this morning, so that I could get on early and do a quick system test. And then one of my practice leads, he's going out on parental leave this weekend as his wife has a C-section. And I said, I'll set some time for us to talk before you change your total focus to the new arrival, right? So that I would be able to make sure he has everything he needs tied up before that new kid comes.
Yeah, and this is an example of the ways that artificial intelligence can really be used, to help you work more effectively. And so I use the same thing that Tim was just using, and it reminds me. Sometimes I make commitments via email that I don't put down on my action items list, and it reminds me. And it's really very smart in that it recognized that I sent something saying I was going to do something, but that I was going to do it in the future, as opposed to if you send an attachment, you say to somebody, here's an attachment with the information you need. It's not going to flag that. It would flag an email that said, I will send you the attachment, or I will send you the information that you need by the end of the week. So again, highly intelligent. Some people are a little creeped out by that. I find it to be great. It is something that you can turn off, but it is something, as someone had mentioned in the chat, that your administrators need to turn on. The My Analytics that we're looking at here, as well as the emails.
Yeah, and in the chat, I see Shar had fewer focus days than I did last month, and I feel for you. Holy smokes, that is it's tough. But I think one of the things that we see are some trends, right, in this. And as everybody has moved out, those meetings all of a sudden have ballooned, and the amount of time we have to spend actually working on our work has definitely gone down. Other tools for metrics within Office 365 is this Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics. This is the latest app. It's in Power BI. Again, some of this is numbers for the sake of numbers. I very much get more use out of the My Analytics metrics than I do here, but if used correctly, there are a lot of things that you can pull out of your Microsoft 365 usage. So there's an executive summary, and for things like storage and how much you're communicating, it can give you a general idea of how things are rolling. If you haven't used this app, I do believe it is available for the GCC tenant, and I think the licensing is all set to use this if you have Power BI turned on. So there's several dashboards in here. We won't go through them all, but they cover adoption, usage, communication, collaboration, storage. You can go through all these tabs and take a look at it. These are Catapult's numbers. So this is back in May. Now, the other thing about this is the data on this is lagged about a month as it comes out of the tenant and gets tucked into the database that drives these Power BI dashboards. So it's anywhere from 15 days to a month lag with some of this data, except for the activation and licensing, which is actually pretty current. So
the ways we really see this being used is, Vince came on earlier with the comptroller. They've rolled out Teams, so really taking a look. It's about for the activations, as Tim was just mentioning, and the licensing, it's about a 1 week delay. So it's unfortunately not real time, but it can really give some insight into how Teams, or whatever the technologies in the O365 that you're rolling out, how they're being adopted. And then Tim's going to show some examples of ways that we can actually merge that with other data to really get some granularity on which groups are adopting it. But we do see a lot of value in knowing how broadly it's being adopted. And then especially as we start to move away from Skype. Skype is going to be retired next year. And so we want to make sure that we start getting people to stop using Skype, and start using Teams. And so these analytics are going to be a big part of that for your administrators.
Yeah, and you can see that in some of your communications credits and other things that you're utilizing, and we're doing some dynamics work right now too. So we're starting to see an increase in our dynamics licensing too. So yeah, so it is, especially for administrators, this is a really helpful tool. Now, as you get into utilizing the data coming out of Office 365 and through the Graph API, which if you haven't dug into that and you're into Office 365, Graph is the stuff, man. It is, for those of us who like to look at data, Microsoft Graph is the treasure trove. And at Catapult, one thing we've done is build out, especially for teams, some specific workloads that we can tie into things like departments and tie that. So here you can see this is our managed services team, my team, the productivity team, our data team, and this is all how they're using calls, how they're using channel messages, how they're using chat. What do total meetings by teams look like? This is interesting because three of our infrastructure practice, my team, and our sales team are all about tied when it comes to the total meetings last month. But that's a lot of meetings. So anyway, you can look at that, and then we can also look at the trends over time too to see how those things are moving and how adoption is going. So there's a lot of customization you can do in Power BI. So first level is your My Analytics. Second level is the Microsoft provided Power BI app that you can install and take a look at. Third level would be doing some customization, right, within Power BI using Microsoft Graph and the data that's coming from there as well, and then combining that with your Active Directory data to start setting that into getting that data organized by specific departments or practices or programs within your organization. And then the next step around data gathering is to use some type of ISV product. And I'll show you a quick example. This is a company called TieGraph that does some really cool work all the way into looking at specific member interactions. So they can give you data down to the specific person. That is entirely controllable. And in high trust organizations, I think it works really well because you can kind of look and see who your champions are within the organization and how they are driving conversations and how they're driving productivity within your organization. And at the same time, it can be a little disconcerting to see all the things that you're doing shown up on the graph. So you have to use the tools that you need, again, to satisfy your program goals or your agency goals. And so if your goal is not to look at individual people, then you would never dig into that. But one of the neat graphs they have, and this looks a little bit crazy, but I've run this against Catapult, and I tend to be a hub of a wheel, right? And there's lots of connections out there. But this is a three-dimensional depiction of networks within your organization, and communication and collaboration. And the things that interest me and interested me at Catapult were these little bubbles out here of people, small groups collaborating that weren't connected to anyone else. And through that, and through the judicious use of Microsoft Delve, I was able to track down within my organization some groups that were doing some really fantastic stuff, but hadn't shared it with anybody. So I think a positive use of some of this technology, right, to make sure that people who have good ideas and are doing bright things get the visibility they need within an organization. So this is TieGraph as for teams, as shown in Power BI. Uses a Power BI app. I just installed this right before the meeting today and connected this to their their test data, but you can actually also connect it to your data source if you have the right permissions to do that, and try out the product within your tenant. So,
Tim, I thought unless you got something else you want to show, I thought we might be able to open it up to the people who are on the call and maybe do some Q&A about areas that they'd be interested in asking you some questions about how they might look at analytics inside their organization or really looking at productivity.
Just one last thing, as you look at these slides, right? Working in Office 365 in that cloud and using all those cloud services is all about iterating for improvement, right? Review, revise, reset, review again. So metrics help us do that. They help us figure out what in this review phase and what to fix, right? And so I'm sure a lot of you are going through this process right now, and there's a few tips around doing that that I've shared here. And, I love to talk about this stuff. So again, iterate on it, review, revise, reset, review again. We've deployed teams 3 or 4 times at Catapult because we've messed it up in one way or another. Not redeployed, we've repositioned the teams in many different ways. So with that, Michael, I'll quit sharing, and we can happy to answer any questions or participate in the conversation.
Yeah. So just really open it up for anyone who has some questions about the My Analytics, around the O365 analytics, or anything with regard to working on productivity.
Hey, Chantel's got her hands up.
Yeah, Chantel, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I was curious. You just mentioned that you reposition teams based on some of your results. Could you share a little bit more about that? Because I'm interested in what that means. Because we've recently introduced this at TxDOT within a limited capacity for some. And so I'm just interested in what that means, what that meant for Catapult.
Yeah, and we're seeing this with a lot of folks that are putting teams out into the organization, is that you deploy it one way, and it really helps to have a plan for how you're going to deploy teams and what types of teams you're going to create and what kind of channels you're going to create. Michael was with us when we first went through this, and we actually created a team for every one of our account executives. And then, it quickly grew massively unwieldy with lots and lots of channels within each team. And we were like, this isn't going to work. So then we switched to a team for each of our customers. And with all of the different projects we do for them as channels, and that actually has survived, right? It worked really well. And so the key was then to take the content and move the content, and all this content sits in SharePoint on the back end. And so it's that plan for, am I going to have a team for every department and then channels within the department? Who are we going to allow to deploy teams? At first, we allowed everyone in the organization to create their own teams. And that quickly grew, how should we say, unwieldy, right? And so we built a Power App that allows us to control teams deployment and do automated requests and automated deployments for teams. Microsoft has a app now for Teams deployment that you can put out. And then there are some other ISV applications, companies like Valo or AvePoint or other ones have Teams deployment and governance apps as well. So there are ways to control your team's governance and your team's structure. And so when I talk about redeploying it, it's really about taking the content that was built and shifting it into a new team's structure.
Great, because I have a feeling we'll have to do the same. And Ann Zeke is on this meeting as well, and she's my counterpart at TxDOT, and so she can attest that this thing is we're trying to figure out how to use it best and most efficiently. And we're kind of running into some of that on a very small scale, but we can see what could happen. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, and there's some things that say whether you use another app or I could quickly show. Let me move Teams over into the right window. Here, I'll move my team. So I know showing Teams in a Teams meeting is a little weird, but we have something called the Catapult Governance Center. It's a power app, and if you click on it, it opens that governance center and says, oh, what do you want to do? Do you want to learn about Teams? Do you want to create a dashboard? Do you want a new request? And if you go through a new request, it kind of guides you through, do you want a group or a team, right? And then it says, oh, what do you want that? Now there's Teams templates, right? So templates are coming out. We can do lots of templates. We have communities of practice at Catapult. We have work teams, which are associated with customers. And then we have some specific initiative-based teams that we build. And so if I do a work team, it says, oh, this is, what a work team is. And it says, is it private? Is it public? And then we run through some different stuff. And one of the things we enforce is a naming convention. And this allows us to enforce naming conventions and to keep, we had some interestingly named teams when we first deployed Teams. I'll put it that way. It allows you to put that list of words that cannot be used to create teams. And some of those are like, you don't want people creating HR number 2 team and creating confusion within your organization, right? So there's also, K-pop dance party team may be perfectly fine as a fun team to have, but you got to make sure the naming of that is all right. So.
Yeah, and Chantel, we can visit some more. This is Michael about some of the ideas around setting up a proper Teams naming convention, and again, how to, as Tim mentioned, what's the right way to set up at a team level, and then using channels, and then using private channels. And so all of those are available to you guys. And so doing that right, you're probably not going to get it right the first time, and that's okay. That's another thing, is as Tim mentioned, we rolled it out one way, we figured out that that's not an efficient way to do it. We tried a different way, and there is the ability to move files around and restructure things, but it's not a trivial task. So a little bit of planning ahead of time can be great.
One thing I would encourage is to have a Teams team, right? So here's our community of practice around Microsoft Teams. You can see in our channel, we have Reza posted, there was a status where some users in North America were having problems joining team meetings. And so we post that kind of stuff. And then here's a slide that goes through what Michael was just talking about, reimagining virtual collaboration, right? That M365 blog that talked about all of those things that Michael talked about at the beginning of that call. And so that's how we share those things internally with all the people at Catapult that are interested in Teams.
And Teacher Retirement System has shared pretty broadly about their adoption of Teams. They started about 2 years ago, so they were one of the earlier agencies for the mass deployment of Teams. And as a result of that, they were really less impacted from what they needed to do to become ready to use remote work as broadly as we need to with COVID. They also shared that they created a Teams team, as Tim was just showing, and that they now have, instead of their help desk answering all the questions about how to do something in Teams, they support each other. And so, and they have champions, a champions network, and I'm happy to visit with any agency about how to create a successful champions network. And then they created this team of people who support other users on how to do something. I do want to, there's a question that came from Scott Reeves. And so Scott's question, he said, due to the pandemic, we have begun allowing clinicians to have group and individual therapy over Teams. This, of course, means that we have had to allow guests in meetings in Teams, and we're experiencing difficulty with the reporting and the visibility. Do you have any hints about what ways that Scott might be able to address that, Tim?
Yeah, so guest access is always something that, even from the early days of SharePoint, right, and OneDrive, has been something that is problematic. The key around guest access is to make sure that some of the security features that are available in the G510. I think, of course, DLP, the data loss prevention, and your advanced data governance components that are there are extremely helpful. The other thing would be if especially for HIPAA compliant organizations, we work with a lot of folks that are under significant regulatory review, whether it's FERC-CIP or CGIS or HIPAA. And there are some things that you can do using Microsoft Graph to understand exactly the data that you shared and the information that you are sharing, whether it's through Teams or SharePoint or other things in Office 365, and to monitor that, report on that, and turn it off first, even down to the individual level as people leave the organization or become uninvolved with your necessary processes. And so a lot of that is handled through Microsoft Graph and the APIs into that. And so if you have some specific questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect you with some folks to talk to. We've been doing a lot of work on that for some of our FERC-CIP, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, infrastructure protection people, to make sure that they control all their external data sharing.
So Scott, if you want to reach out to Tim, I'll put his email address there in the chat.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was super easy, but Office 365 information protection is a layer cake of components that all do amazing things, and you have to kind of build that cake appropriately to make sure people can do their job and protect the information that they need.
So Eduardo Marquis asked a question, whether he said the Catapult governance app seems like a solution every organization will need. Is Microsoft planning to provide something along these lines in the near future? So there is an app that's like this, not as feature rich as Catapult's app, that is in GitHub. I do not have the link for that, but I'll see if I can find it real quick. And so it just has some basic governance built into it. Catapult has really taken that to the next level with some of the templates, so that when you create a team site, it has the right channels and even the right content inside those channels, and can integrate to Active Directory a little more effectively. And there are some agencies that have deployed that app. Yeah, I think it's a great point, Eduardo. There are also other ISVs like AvePoint who have created, as Tim mentioned earlier, an application to do that. I think it is probably has even more features, and they're an ISV, so they build products. But the Catapult one is less expensive. I know that much, but it's more feature rich than what we give away for free, and less feature rich than something that's quite a bit more expensive.
Yeah, we just built it to help people avoid the anxiety that you get in an organization where you keep good governance and you deploy a product that is creating groups and SharePoint sites and all this stuff, and you want to keep your hands around that a little tighter.
Yeah. And Anne asked the question, was curious, you said you worked with TRS. Do you also work with TEA? I know that they're in the education group, but Catapult works quite a bit with TEA.
Yeah, we sure do. And we, just as a shout out to Joy and the DIR folks, we've been working with DIR for many years and have the contracts necessary to work in with DIR. So I don't know. We I always like working with our government agencies across the country, but here in Texas especially, Texas folks have their act together. It's very nice.
All right. Well, those are some good questions. Is there anybody else that has a question? Thanks, Janelle. Janelle gives a shout out for you, Tim.
Thanks. I appreciate the good press. Link to training is another one.
Yeah, which Shari, if you want to come off mute, is there a specific training you're looking for, or just some of the training that I announced during this call?
We're looking for SharePoint, and I'm particularly interested in Power BI. So we'd like to do some large group training for divisions and possibly more in the agency. We're a government agency, so we were very excited to see that you offer that.
Yeah, so I will post in the meeting chat here the email address that you can send a request to get started for the customer success training. That's through the Microsoft Store. Let me post that now, and then let's see. Okay, so Microsoft Store training, and then I posted earlier in the chat window the link to the let me get the proper name. It's called the Learning Pathways site. That was that site that I talked about that can be downloaded into your SharePoint environment, and it has a bunch of training that's available. It has SharePoint training. It has Office, Excel, Teams, all kinds of training available there. And I'll post that one again. And then one of the things that yes, absolutely. One other thing that I want to share, and let me share my screen again.
I thought we just kind of went through this.
Let's see.
Michael, while you're doing that, there was one about being able to reorganize Teams channels and move Teams channels between teams.
Oh, yeah.
That is on the roadmap, but I have not seen a set date for that. Because you have to move the whole SharePoint repository under the back end of that, there's a little bit of work. I think that's still work being done there.
There is a link. We made an announcement. You may or may not know that Microsoft purchased LinkedIn a few years ago, and LinkedIn has they do a lot of training in addition to the social and job aspect. And so what we did is we made an announcement that we are making available at no cost a huge amount of LinkedIn learning training that is across the most needed job areas, and it's going to be fully integrated into LinkedIn so that you can get free training and then see jobs that are in that training. And then we've also significantly reduced the cost of certifications. And so what I would recommend is to go and take a look and see if there is SharePoint training that's available through that LinkedIn learning initiative. And so we're planning on training 25 million people worldwide on the digital skills. So please take a look at that. It is very, very exciting. And there's an announcement there and a webcast. And then we're actually going to be building an application built into Teams that's called Microsoft Learn, and it will integrate to that training. So a lot that's going to be coming in the very near future with regard to training. And with that, we are at the bottom of the hour. So I think we'll wrap up on time. I just want to thank everybody again for attending. We had a lot of people in the meeting. At one point, we had 214 people. So thanks to everybody who joined, and thanks for those of you who stayed through the whole thing. I'll be saving this video to our playlist on YouTube. I'll post that really quickly here, and so you can get that. And then Joy, are you going to send out the slide deck afterward, or would you like for me to send that out?
No, go ahead and send it to me, and we'll get an email out, depending how fast you can give it to me, hopefully tomorrow, if not Monday. We'll send it out to everybody who signed in.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jason. Glad you were here. Appreciate it. And then I will post the evaluation URL one more time. Thank you for the reminder on that.
It's a combination. The sign-in is the evaluation.
Yes, exactly. So I have it on the screen. I think I'm still sharing my screen.
And Michael, why don't we mention next month's date so that they can maybe tag their calendars?
Oh, yeah. And so actually, we're not going to be having a training in August, community meeting, because it's during the task conference. And so, but we will be having one in September for sure. And it'll probably be around accessibility. And so for those of you who are involved in your accessibility initiatives with your agencies, it's going to be very, very, very good.
Yeah,
Tim,
it's
thank
not
you.
literally on the same day as task, but it's that same
Yep.
week, and everybody's going to be really busy in August.
Yes. And so, and I want to say another thank you to Tim Cohn. Tim, really appreciate your expertise on this. And this is a really good session, very informative. So thanks for being part of it.
Yeah, always feel free to reach out if you have questions. This is a subject I'm really passionate about, and there's lots of stuff coming out and lots of ways to measure your productivity across the Office 365. So.
And if you look in the chat, the evaluation code is there, and then I'll also put it up on the screen. Let's see, am I sharing my screen? Yes. So all you have to do is take out your smartphone and turn on your camera application and point it at the QR code right there, and it will take you to a web page where you can fill out the sign-in form. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you again, and we'll call that a wrap, and I'll stop the recording. Everybody have a great rest of your summer, and we will talk in September, but feel free to reach out to me in the meantime.
Great. Thank you.